You know, when you picture a serial killer, you probably imagine some kind of obvious monster. But what if they looked, well, friendly? What if they were a 6'9" giant that everyone in town called the Gentle Giant? That's exactly who we're talking about today. We're going to dive into the absolutely chilling story of Edmund Kemper, a guy with a genius-level IQ who is hiding some of the most horrific crimes imaginable.
I mean, just look at this. It's like you're looking at two totally different people, right? On one side, you've got this brilliant guy, super tall, nicknamed the Gentle Giant. Seems harmless enough. But then you look at the other side. 10 murders. Crimes so brutal they're hard to even read. This right here, this is the whole puzzle of Edmund Kemper. It's what makes his story so terrifying. How in the world did nobody see this coming?
Okay, and check this out. This picture was taken right after he was arrested in 1973. Does he look worried? Panicked? No. He's calm, he's relaxed, he almost looks like he's smiling. And keep in mind, he had just finished confessing to this trail of absolute horror. So it really makes you wonder, and it's the main question we're trying to answer here. How could this guy be that monster? So to even begin to understand how someone becomes this monster, you've got to go back, way back. The seeds of all this violence were sown really early on, and a childhood that was, well, it was a nightmare.
Right from the get-go, Kemper's life was just filled with trauma. His parents' marriage was a total war zone, and his mother, Clarnell, she took a lot of her anger out on him. I mean, she tore him down constantly, humiliated him, and eventually she literally locked him in the basement to sleep, in a damp, cold basement. She was paranoid he'd hurt his sisters. So you can imagine, this kind of isolation, this constant abuse, it started to fuel some really dark stuff. He began having these twisted fantasies, and it even led to him killing family pets.
And listen to this. This quote isn't from some expert trying to analyze the situation after the fact. Nope, this is from Kemper's own father. He said that suicide missions in wartime were nothing compared to living with Clarnell. Just think about that. A war veteran found living with his own wife more terrifying than combat. That tells you everything you need to know about how toxic that house was.
Well, eventually, those dark fantasies, they boiled over into reality. He was sent away to live with his grandparents, but his grandmother was just as domineering and abusive as his mother. It was like history repeating itself for him. And so at just 15 years old, he shot and killed both of them. And when the cops asked him why he killed his grandma, his answer was just ice cold. He just said he wanted to see what it felt like. No emotion, nothing.
And here's the crazy part. The system actually caught him. They had him. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, sent to a state hospital. The doctors there saw right away he was a genius, with an IQ of 145. But Kemper was smart enough to play the game. He learned all the right things to say, how to act cured. And so, even though his own psychiatrists were practically screaming not to do it, a judge released him on his 21st birthday. And where did he send him? You guessed it, right back into the custody of the one person who was the source of all his rage, his mother.
So as you can probably guess, this release kicks off the most infamous chapter of his life. He's back under his mother's roof, all that old anger and resentment is just bubbling up, and Kemper starts to hunt. He starts looking for new victims, specifically young women, who in his twisted mind were all just stand-ins for the one person he truly, deeply hated.
And boy, did things escalate. In less than a year, his violence just completely exploded. You can see it right here. It's just one after another. He started preying on young female college students who were hitchhiking around Santa Cruz. And that's how he got the name that everyone knows him by today, the Ed Killer. This quote, this is straight from Kemper, and it gives you a terrifying look right inside his broken mind. He says one part of him sees an attractive woman and thinks, wow, I'd like to talk to her, date her. You know, a totally normal thought. But then the other side of him thinks, I wonder how her head would look on a stick. It's just unbelievable. He knew what was normal, but that violent part of him, that need to possess and control, it always won.
Now, don't think for a second this was just some guy snapping. No way. He was a predator, and he was incredibly calculating. He used his huge size to his advantage, playing up the gentle giant thing so people wouldn't be scared of him. He even put his mom's university parking sticker on his car to look trustworthy to students. But here's the part that really gets me. He would hang out at a local bar that he knew cops went to. He'd befriend them, buy them drinks, all while listening to them talk about the investigation into his own murders. Just diabolical.
You know, with all this talk about psychology and methods, it's so important to remember that these were real people. Marianne Pesce and Anita Lucchesa, they were just 18 years old, students with their entire lives stretched out in front of them, and they were the first ones he killed in his 1972 spree.
Everything he had done up to this point, it was all building towards one single, horrific act, the one murder that his entire life seemed to be leading up to. And once he finally did it, well, that's when this already insane story takes its most bizarre turn yet. So, on April 20th, 1973, after a whole lifetime of simmering hatred and abuse, Kemper finally did it. He finally acted on the fantasy that had been with him for years. While his mother, Clarnell, was sleeping, he walked into a room and ended her life.
But what he did next, it wasn't just murder, it was pure symbolic rage. He desecrated her body in the most horrific ways. He even cut out her larynx and threw it in the garbage disposal. Why? Because in his own words, he was tired of her bitched and screamed and yelled at me over so many years. It was his ultimate act of silencing her.
And just like that, he had done it. He had achieved his life's goal. With his mother dead, the engine that drove all his rage, the very reason for his killing spree, it was just gone. There was no point anymore. It was all over. So what do you do when you've accomplished your life's mission? Well, for Kemper, he picked up the phone and turned himself in. Seriously, he drove for hundreds of miles waiting to hear about the murders on the news. When nothing happened, he apparently got bored, found a payphone, called the police, and just confessed to everything.
And he didn't just confess either. He was a totally open book. He calmly led the police around to all the different spots where he'd hidden his victims' remains. He gave them these incredibly detailed, unemotional accounts of every single crime. It was so detached and matter-of-fact that it completely stunned even the most hardened detectives.
So, of course, Kemper was sentenced to life in prison. But believe it or not, his story doesn't stop there. And probably the most disturbing twist of all, the man who took so many lives would actually go on to help save others. This just adds another layer to the whole paradox of Edmund Kemper. In prison, he was apparently a model inmate. He used that genius-level intellect and his, clear, articulate voice to narrate over 5,000 hours of audiobooks for the blind. Yeah, the guy they called the co-ed killer was also the voice of books like Star Wars for a whole generation of people.
But his most significant, and frankly, most disturbing legacy came from his work with the FBI. See, back in the 70s, criminal profiling was a brand new idea, and Kemper was like the perfect subject. He had that genius IQ, zero remorse, and he was more than willing to talk about exactly why he did what he did. His interviews gave early profilers like the legendary John Douglas a look inside a serial killer's mind that they had never had before. He helped them figure out those three core traits you see in so many of these guys: manipulation, domination, and control. The Netflix show Mindhunter? Yeah, it was inspired by these very interviews.
But even though he was a so-called model prisoner and helped the FBI, let's be clear, society has never, ever forgotten what he did. Every single time he's been up for parole, the answer has been a hard no. Denied, 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 all the way up to 2024. He's an old man now in bad health, but he is still considered far too dangerous to ever walk free again.
And all of this leaves us with a really tough, really uncomfortable question, doesn't it? Edmund Kemper was without a doubt a monster. What he did caused a level of pain that's just impossible to comprehend. But the things the FBI learned from talking to him, from studying his mind, helped them catch who knows how many other killers. So can a person be both a monster and a valuable research tool? That's the complicated and very dark legacy of the co-ed killer.